Hi everybody, it's Franny from Heidi and Franny's Garage, and today we are swapping out the serpentine accessory belt on our 2004 Porsche 996 Turbo. Tools and supplies we'll need a 7mm nut driver to remove the clamp on the airbox. Then we'll need a 14mm next to it there that we'll use to remove the airbox itself. Then we've got our ratchet, and then that's a 13mm socket that we're going to use to loosen and remove the bolts on the big accessory wheel. Then above that is our replacement belt, and to the far right is our parts tray. I'll run you through the steps for today. So our first step is going to be to pull out our airbox. And once that's out, we'll have complete access to the belt below. And then on the far right is a big pulley with 3 bolts on it. We're going to crack all 3 of those loose because we end up removing that pulley as we get the belt out. Then there's a big tensioner on there as well. So we'll rotate our tensioner to loosen up the belt and start pulling it off some of the idlers and things. And then we can pull that pulley on the far right out as well and get the belt completely out. So then we just refit our new belt exactly the way the old one was routed and reinstall that pulley on the right, and then go ahead and torque those 3 bolts back down and double check everything, because once the airbox goes back in you really can't see the belt very well at all. So if we're happy with that, then our last step is going to be really just to reinstall the airbox, and then we'll go ahead and start the car just as a double check. Our first step is going to be to loosen the clamp of the airbox onto the intake manifold. It's our 7mm nut driver I use. Now you can use a flathead screwdriver if you want, but I like the nut drivers. They won't slide off and go all crazy on you. So it's just right here, and you really just need to loosen it. All right, great. And our next step is going to be to remove the mass airflow sensor connector at the top of the little snout on the airbox here. It's pretty simple. There's a little push button on the side, and you want to push on the top of that, and it'll pull the little bottom part out, and you can wiggle it up and out. It's very simple. So you depress this up at the top. You can kind of hear it snap a little bit. Then you wiggle it back and forth, and it will come up and out. There we go. So just move that out of the way. That's safe over here to the side. Now also over here on the side of the airbox is a little catch to hold on to the wire, so we want to open that up as well. So you just pry the top of it open and it'll sort of pop open like that. There you go. And then you can completely remove the wire completely out of the way. The next step is to remove the 14mm bolt that's right in the back here, holding the airbox in. So it's the only other bolt holding this on. It's kind of a funny bolt. It has a big shoulder on it here and a little washer and stuff, so easy enough to get off. Now the trick to getting this airbox out, it's kind of weird. You have to rotate it all the way up and then sort of twist it in a little bit and it will come out. It's a little confusing the first time. You're like, what? But it does come out pretty easily. So what we do is we rotate this up like this and then sort of twist it back this way, and you can see me kind of kicking this end of it towards the front there, and it will rotate right out. Easy peasy. Something I want to show you real quick like a bunny. See these rubber grommets here, these big rubber grommets? These rubber grommets are here for 2 posts that are at the bottom of the airbox. Now what happens a lot of times, they're quite loose in here, they can fall out and they can get anywhere. They could fall down here, and worse, probably fall down in the crux of this belt. And if you're not paying attention when you put the thing back on and looking for both of these to be there, and this one's gone and it's fallen down in here, then when you go to start the car, it'll go ahead and split your belt for you. It'll just snap it right in half because it'll get stuck between the belt and the pulley. So always be very careful and make sure that your little rubber grommets are where they're supposed to be. Next, we're going to break these 3 bolts loose that are on this big pulley over here. Since the belt is still tight, we don't want to take them out, but we do want to go ahead and loosen them up at this point. My last bolt is sitting down a little bit, so I can't really get the socket on it, so I'm just going to go ahead and use a wrench on it. Now at this point, you want to take a good look at the routing of this belt, because you've got to put it on exactly the same way it came off. So it kind of goes all over the place. So it comes across straight on the top, cuts back this way and all over. So probably a great idea is to use your little shop camera and go ahead and take a picture of it. So I'll point out the direction of this. Starting at the top here, it comes across to the left to the outside of the alternator here, then down to the inside of this idler pulley, then to the outside of the water pump, I believe it is, then down around the bottom of that, back up over this idler, which is also the tensioner, then it snakes back this direction and goes down around the crankshaft pulley down at the bottom. It comes off the crankshaft pulley and comes up the far right side of this pulley here. Then it continues along here, comes down and goes around this idler here, then comes up here and comes across, this is the air conditioning compressor, comes across here and we're back to the top again. Now our next step is going to be to take the tension off the belt and then to go ahead and get it off of one or two of these pulleys so we can get it loose. Now, I didn't put this in my beginning because I didn't really know how big this bolt was, but it's a 24 millimeter, so I have a very long 24 millimeter wrench that's going to work great. Now what we want to do in order to loosen this is to rotate our wrench clockwise. That'll reduce the tension and allow us to get this off one of these pulleys at the top, and should be able to slack the entire belt that way. Okay, here we go. It takes a bit of force, and when it's loose enough, we're going to work it off of the idler pulley here on the left, it looks like. All right. Okay, great. All right, with that loose, we can start working it off of the other various pulleys here. Just gonna have to kind of fuss with it a bit to get it off. Jeez. There we go. That's that side. Another pulley here. The trick is usually to get these things off and sort of turn them sideways to get them out. But you just have to sort of fuss with it a bit. There we go. All right. Okay, you can work it around the crankshaft pulley here as well. There we go. Okay. Now that leaves us our pulley over here that we loosened up. So let's go ahead and pull these bolts the rest of the way off. All right, I'm going to leave it with the yellow mark up. And it should just sort of come forward. There it goes. Now it comes. All right, with that out of the way, it's a simple matter to get the rest of the belt the rest of the way out. And there it is. Now we have our old belt out. This, I believe, is the original belt. It still looks okay, but this car has 60,000 miles on it, and so to me that's time to replace this belt. And since this belt covers every single accessory on the car, when it goes out, everything's go out. The water pump, the alternator, air conditioner, everything is going to go out. So we definitely don't want that to happen while we're driving. Not to mention, I imagine if this belt did go, it would start to fray first, and it would just sort of thrash everything inside the car. So always better to replace it and not have a problem in the future. One thing I'd like to mention is if you're going to go ahead and put the belt back on, for instance, if you were just doing the alternator bearing or something, or one of the idler pulley bearings, but you're going to reuse the belt, go ahead and make a mark on it in one of the directions so you know, let's say facing right on top of it, and then that way when you reinstall it, you'll know which direction it is and you don't get it flipped one way or the other, because it should rotate the same direction that it did before. From here, we're going to just go ahead and refit our belt. I'm going to start with the crankshaft pulley all the way at the bottom, just because it's all the way down there, and I'll work kind of from the bottom up and see if that works pretty well. One thing I want to do while I'm here, I suppose, before I get started, is just spin my idler pulleys. I just want to make sure that they're happy and their bearings are good and they're not making any noise. Sort of rattle them back and forth a bit and see if they give it all. Might as well do the alternator while you're at it. Should have a little end play, that's fine, but the bearings shouldn't wobble back and forth. Same thing with the air conditioner. Yep, they all spin, they're nice and silent. If they feel the least bit rumbly, they're going to have to get replaced. Alright, well, we'll start by fitting it down below first. I'm going to put it in flat and then twist it. Alright, so now we have it around the crankshaft. We'll get it up around like this. And then it's going to go down below this pulley here. Alright, then it goes back around this idler and then across the top. And across the top straight here. Then it's going to go around this idler down here. This one is also a bit tight. Okay, around now, let's take up the slack a little bit. Okay, wonderful. And then we're all set. Something to note, if you do kind of lose your way a little bit, that on all the idlers, they're only going to run on the outside of the belt, or the flat part of the belt. They're not going to run on the rib side. So you'll never put the rib side of the belt on a flat idler. So at this point, you just want to go back through and double check and make sure that everything is very much right on the pulleys, and that you've got all these wonderful little grooves here sitting inside the grooves of the actual pulleys. Okay, so now that we verified the route of our belt and we're pretty happy with it and we see it sitting perfectly on all of the pulleys here, we're going to take it off of the alternator at the top. We need a bit of slack so we can get our pulley back in. Okay, so I've got it taken off the top here. I'm going to fit our pulley back in and get it all lined up. With our big pulley back on and everything still very loose, I'm going to start our 3 bolts back in and put them in hand tight. With our big pulley on the right all back in and the bolts hand tight, next step is going to be to use the tensioner again, rotating it clockwise to reduce the tension on the belt, and then we're going to fit the belt back up over the alternator pulley here. Rotate this guy back, then work our belt up over the alternator. Make sure it doesn't come off anywhere else. Make it flip. All right. And the last little bit. Get over the last thing here. There we go. It should slip over now. There it goes. All right, the last little bit. Okay. Now before you let go of the tensioner, triple check every one of your pulleys and make sure the belt is sitting within the pulley properly and in the slots properly. That's a very important step. All right. And now's the time to go back through your photos and just double, triple check. You want to make sure everything is routed properly and that your belt's sitting in the grooves properly and it's in the center of each of the idlers. So I'm just going to go through each one of my photos and I'm going to make sure that everything looks exactly the way it should. Great, so we're very happy with our belt. The tension feels great. We got our new belt installed. Super awesome. With our belt in place and exactly where we want it, our next step is going to be, remember those 3 bolts that we had on our big pulley? We're going to go ahead and torque those down to 17 foot-pounds. With those bolts torqued, the last thing to do is to go ahead and put the Airbox back in. So there's a little trick to that, so I'll show you how that works. So remember with our Airbox, we had our little rubber grommets here. We have 2 of them here. And they go in these holes down here in the sheet metal. Now, they start from the left. There's 4 holes in here and 2 grommets. So we only need to put in 2 of them. They start actually on the far left hole. They skip one. And then they go to the hole that's one in from the right. So it's very important that we get our pegs here, so this peg here and this peg up here, that we get them in those grommets and that those grommets stay put. Like I said before, the last thing we really want is one of these little grommets falling down into the crux of the belt. And us not knowing it, we go to start the car and snap goes the belt. Okay, it's a little hard to get it to make sure they're in and everything, so we're going to kind of, at the end, we're going to reach around and use the Braille method and just sort of feel for them. So just kind of take a look at them, see where they are, and just sort of be ready to check them in the end. So we've got our little grommets in. So the trick to this thing, if you try to just put this thing in like this and try to get it in, it kind of seems like that's the way you do it. And you think, oh, well, I got this peg over, it should go in. It won't. It just will not. And you'll try and work it this way and that way and it won't go in. So you're thinking, maybe I'll just take this hose off and blah, blah, blah. There's a way easier way. So what you do is take the Airbox, rotate it 180 degrees, like this, all right? And then put it in the hole there. Then as you put it in, sort of rotate it down like this. And then as it's coming down, you want to reach back to the connection in the back, the big hose that connects it into the air intake, and work it into that as you're going down. Okay. Now the next step is to get the pegs in the grommets. So you can see my arm is in the back here. I'm reaching around and finding the grommet with one finger and the peg with another, and you just sort of line them up. There we go. You can also see the grommet on this side. The peg and the grommet on this side may be a little easier to see, and they're not going to change positions on you. So let's reach around again, find your grommet, find your peg, and drop it in. There it goes, and it'll pop in. So reach around the front one. Do I feel the peg and the grommet? Okay, I feel my grommet, I feel my peg and the grommet, great. On this side, same thing. I'm going to reach around. Yep, I can hear it. I can feel it and I can hear it. So I feel very confident it's exactly where it needs to be. So our next step is to use our trusty dusty 7mm nut driver and tighten the clamp that connects the Airbox to the air intake. So you just want to slide the clamp up so you can get at it. Go ahead and tighten it down. Okay. And our final thing is to put in the bolt that holds the Airbox into the back of the car again. It's our funky little shoulder bolt. It's 14mm. Okay, that's good, that's snug, everything's great. We have one final step that you don't want to forget, and that is to re-plug in our mass airflow sensor. Really simple, it just plugs on and clicks. But you want to hear that click when it goes on. Our little wire retainer guy. The little connector for it goes towards the center of the car. And the little red dot you should see on the left side. And it just snaps into place, and you should hear it snap. There it goes. There's a little snap. One last time, just sort of take a gander back here and look around, make sure there isn't anything gone goofy on you. Our next step is going to be to go ahead and start the car and make sure our belt is happy. Our belt is happily spinning around and working just fine. No weird noises and no lights on the dash. We are all done. Woo. Holy cow. Kind of humid out today. Holy cow. Woo. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video on how to change the serpentine belt on a 2004 Porsche 996 Turbo. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up. And if you got any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below and I'll get right to them. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, safe travels. Bye.